Welcome back to Chat Like a Native. Picture this. You're standing in a crowded bakery.
Oh, I can picture it. The stress is already building.
Right. The line is out the door, the espresso machine is making that hissing sound, and you finally step up to the counter. And the barista looks at you and fires off a question in rapid-fire English.
And your mind just goes completely
It's
blank.
completely blank. Your heart starts pounding, your throat tightens, and, well, you know the words, but you just can't find them. We have all been that nervous student, frozen in the spotlight.
Yeah, it's a terrible feeling.
It really is. But I want to make a promise to you right now. By the end of our chat today, you are going to stop feeling like you're waiting for this perfect conversation to happen.
Exactly. You don't need perfection.
Right. Instead, you're going to gain the independence to move through the English-speaking world without that fear. We are going to teach you how to become a PRO. That's P-R-O.
I love that acronym. It stands for patterns, recovery, and openers.
Yep. Patterns. So you learn flexible phrase shapes instead of rigid sentences. Recovery. So you know exactly what to say when you inevitably get stuck. And openers, which are soft, polite starts that buy your brain a second to think.
Because that is where true fluency actually lives, Not in giving a 10-minute speech or discussing business strategy. Fluency is built in the small moments.
The 30 seconds with the cashier, right?
Exactly. Asking for directions, ordering a coffee. Real life is fast and unpredictable, unlike a textbook. So you need flexible, polite language to survive those small conversations smoothly.
But let's back up for a second. Why do we even freeze in that bakery in the first place? I mean, I spent years in language classrooms. I got good grades on all the grammar tests.
Most people do.
Right, but the moment I stepped out onto a busy street and someone actually spoke to me, my brain just shut down. It feels like the classroom sets us up with a completely false expectation of what language actually is.
That is so true, because the classroom environment is, well, it's essentially a sterile laboratory.
A sterile laboratory, yeah.
In a textbook, the conversation is slow. The audio track is perfectly enunciated by voice actors in a quiet studio. And if you miss a word, your eyes just move back to the beginning of the sentence and you read it again.
You always know the topic. Like you turn to chapter 4 and you know you're talking about the weather.
Exactly.
Uh,
But out on the street, people speak incredibly quickly, their words blur together, and they ask sudden, unexpected questions.
It makes me think of rehearsing for a play. A textbook is like having the script for weeks.
Mm.
You know your cue, you know the other actor's lines, but real-life English is, it's pure improv comedy.
That's a great way to put it, pure improv.
You walk into a cafe, someone hands you a bizarre prop, like a question about a loyalty card or a seasonal syrup, and you have to react immediately.
And if you don't react immediately, panic sets in.
So if we are constantly failing in these improv moments, how do we ever build confidence? Because the advice is usually always, just be confident.
Telling someone to just be confident ignores human biology completely.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When you are spoken to in a foreign language and you don't instantly understand, your brain's amygdala interprets that as a social threat.
Wow, an actual threat.
Yes, it triggers a mild fight or flight response. Your working memory, the part of your brain responsible for pulling vocabulary and grammar together, gets flooded with stress hormones and essentially locks up.
So confidence does not actually come before you speak.
No, confidence is the reward you get after you survive these tiny improv moments.
Wait, so I'm not supposed to feel confident before I walk into the store?
Exactly. Many learners wait to feel perfectly prepared before they open their mouths. But that's backwards. You build confidence by successfully surviving a 1-minute interaction with a driver or asking a pharmacist a question.
You're teaching your brain that English isn't dangerous.
Precisely. You give your amygdala empirical evidence. You walk away with that feeling of, okay, I can handle this.
I really love that shift in perspective. But okay, if my working memory is locked up and the interaction is coming at me fast, how do I stop the panic? Because standing there in total silence for 5 seconds feels incredibly awkward.
It does. And this is where the O and P of our PRO method come in, starting with opener.
Openers.
Right. Openers are the perfect antidote to that awkward silence. An opener is simply the first small automatic phrase you use before delivering your main message.
Like saying, excuse me.
Exactly. Or, sorry, can I ask something? Or, hi, I was wondering, These small phrases perform a vital psychological function.
Which is buying time.
Yes. And while your mouth is automatically saying, hi, I was wondering, you are buying your brain 1 or 2 vital seconds to actually organize the request.
So it's a socially acceptable delay tactic.
Right.
I'm basically buffering like a loading screen on a video, but doing it politely.
That is the perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And within these openers, there is a specific word that acts as a social lubricant, the word just. Yeah, saying, I just wanted to ask, or I'm just looking, thanks.
Okay, I've always wondered about that. Doesn't adding just make you sound a bit hesitant? Assertiveness training usually tells you to remove words like that.
That's true in some contexts, but in everyday politeness, especially in British or American English, indirectness is often equated with politeness. When you walk up to a stranger, you are technically interrupting their day.
Right, you're a sudden obstacle.
Exactly. If you say, I need to check my ticket, it can sound like a demand, but adding just like, I just need to check my ticket, signals that your request is small, low impact, and won't take much time. It lowers the social stakes.
Okay, so the opener buys me 2 seconds of time and lowers the stakes. But what do I actually do with those 2 seconds? Because I remember buying one of those travel phrase books, and I spent weeks memorizing full sentences.
Oh no, the phrasebook trap.
Yes. I would like a cup of black coffee, please.
Deal.
But the moment the barista asked, do you want the house blend or single origin? My entire memorized script fell apart. Those 2 seconds of buffering didn't save me.
Because memorizing complete sentences makes you totally inflexible. You are preparing for a conversation where the other person also has your script. And they don't.
They never had the script.
Never. When the situation inevitably changes, your brain searches for the exact sentence, can't find it, and crashes. That is why the P in our method learning phrase patterns is the biological workaround.
So how is a pattern different from a sentence?
A pattern is a structural shape with an empty slot. Instead of memorizing, I would like a cup of black coffee, you internalize the shape. Could I have blank, please?
Oh, I see. It is like having a skeleton key. Learning one full sentence is like carrying a key that only opens one specific cafe in the entire world.
Exactly.
But learning the pattern, could I have blank, please, gives you a skeleton key that unlocks dozens of doors. I can seamlessly slot in a coffee, the receipt, or window seat.
The skeleton key analogy perfectly captures it. Another highly versatile pattern is, do you have blank? You take that into a clothing store. Do you have this in a smaller size?
Or restaurant, do you have vegetarian options?
Right. By focusing on the pattern, your brain only has to recall the core structure, which uses far less working memory. Then you just swap out the final noun.
Let's take those skeleton keys out into the real world, because spaces like shops and airports require specific touch. These patterns seem to do a lot of heavy lifting for politeness.
They do. Politeness in English heavily depends on how you phrase requests. Grammatically, you can issue a direct command, give me the menu, or open the door.
But if I say, give me the menu to a waiter, I'm going to get some serious side-eye. It feels so jarring.
Because it creates instant social friction. Direct imperatives sound like orders given to a subordinate. A smoother approach relies on those polite patterns we talked about. Could I see the menu, please?
I want to pause on, could I? Because I hear can I used all the time, like, can I get a coffee? Is one better, or are they interchangeable?
Both are grammatically fine and universally understood. However, could usually sounds slightly softer and more polite than can.
Why is that?
Well, could is technically a conditional form, which creates a tiny bit of psychological distance. It implies, if it is possible, could I? That slight distance makes it feel less intrusive.
It's like adding shock absorbers to a car. Translated directly from your native language might be like driving over a pothole at 60 miles an hour. It jars the other person.
That's a great way to look at it.
Using words like could and would you mind doesn't change your destination. You're still asking for the menu. But they act as shock absorbers so the interaction doesn't crash.
And you really need those shock absorbers when you're running errands. If you walk into a pharmacy, having the pattern, do you have something for? Ready means you don't need to know the medical term for analgesics.
You just say, do you have something for a headache?
Exactly. You just need the pattern and the symptom.
That brings up travel, which I feel is the ultimate stress test. When I'm lost in a massive, noisy airport, I find myself trying to construct these incredibly complex, highly formal sentences to impress the gate agent.
Under extreme stress, we overcompensate. But the golden rule of travel English is that clarity overrules complexity every single time.
So I shouldn't say, I am in a situation where I do not know the exact location of the correct place for my flight.
No, even though that is exactly what comes out when panic sets in, keep it simple, polite, and highly specific. Use your opener and a direct question. Excuse me, where is gate 12?
Just survive and get to the plane on time.
Right. Short sentences are the most effective tool in a high-stress, noisy environment.
Okay, so we have our openers to buy time and our polite patterns to smooth out the bumps. But sometimes the outside world hits back at lightning speed.
Yes, it does.
So what happens when the conversation moves faster than we can process?
We call these quick exchanges. These are the rapid-fire, back-and-forth moments that trip learners up purely because of the speed.
Give me an example.
Imagine the checkout counter. The cashier says, "Would you like a bag?" You say, "Yes, please." They ask, "Cash or card?" You say, "Card, please." Anything else? "No, thanks." That entire six-turn interaction takes about 5 seconds.
And if I am trying to translate every single word of that into my native language, formulate a response, and translate it back, the cashier is already looking at the next customer.
Precisely why translation fails in real time. For quick exchanges, you must rely on short, automatic answers. You don't need to say, "Yes, I would like to pay with my credit card." "Card, please" is completely natural.
But what happens when things go wrong? Say a waiter brings me a plate of pasta, but I ordered a salad. How do I fix that without making them defensive?
That requires a soft correction. Pointing at the plate and saying, "That is wrong," triggers a defensive posture immediately.
Yeah, that sounds aggressive.
Instead, English relies on softening phrases. You can use, "Actually, I ordered the salad," or, "Sorry, I think there may be a mistake." Saying, "I think there may be a mistake," removes the blame.
It focuses on the situation rather than pointing a finger.
Exactly.
But I want to zero in on the word actually. Is actually a double-edged sword.
Oh, it absolutely can be.
Because if you say it calmly, it's polite. But if your tone is sharp, couldn't it sound incredibly aggressive, like, "Actually, I ordered the salad"?
Tone completely alters the meaning of "actually." Used softly with a slight upward inflection, it's a gentle redirection. Used forcefully with a downward inflection, it becomes a reprimand.
So tone is just as important as the vocabulary, which reminds me of vocal inflection, the absolute most terrifying scenario, the phone call.
Oh, phone call.
When the phone rings, all my confidence completely evaporates.
Phone calls strip away half of human communication. You can't see the other person's mouth. You can't read their facial expressions. You are flying blind.
So how do we survive flying blind?
By prioritizing extreme clarity. On the phone, speed is your enemy. If you need to spell your name or an address, do it slowly. Use phonetic alphabets or simple examples. A as in apple.
Well, if they speak too fast.
Take control of the pacing. If they throw numbers at you, say, "Was that 15 or 50? Or could you spell that for me?"
But what if it's not just a bad connection? What if the cashier speaks a mile a minute, uses slang I've never heard, and my brain just utterly freezes?
This brings us to the final piece of the PRO method, the R, which stands for recovery.
Recovery.
Yes. There is a massive myth that to be fluent, you must understand every single word immediately. We need to shatter that myth right now. Native speakers do not understand everything immediately.
Wait, really?
Of course not. We mishear things in noisy restaurants, we zone out, we ask people to repeat themselves all the time.
So what's the difference?
The difference is that the native speaker knows how to recover without panicking.
Oh, so we need a safety net. It reminds me of a trapeze act. The acrobat doesn't plan to fall, but knowing they have a safety net beneath them makes them brave enough to jump.
The R phrases are your safety net. If you don't hear something, you don't stand in frozen silence. You deploy the net. Sorry, could you say that again? Or could you speak a little more slowly, please?
And if you forget a word halfway through a sentence,
You hold your ground, say, I can't remember the exact word, but it's like, no, or let me think for a second.
it's like, let me think for a second. Take so much pressure off. It tells them, I'm still here. Just give me a moment.
Yeah.
But it's also about showing we are in a shared conversation, right?
Yes, and that is where social response phrases come in. When someone gives you information, silence can feel dismissive. If a receptionist says, breakfast is from 7 to 10, and you just stare at them.
The interaction feels dead.
Completely. But if you reply with a warm, perfect thank you, or got it, you create a brief moment of social connection.
And we also need to know how to disconnect smoothly so it doesn't feel awkward at the end. Like, I have my coffee, my change is in my pocket, but we're just lingering.
The graceful exit is a vital skill. In a shop, a cheerful thanks for your help, have a nice day closes the loop. On the phone, thanks for your time, goodbye is all you need.
All right, so we've broken down PRO openers to buy time, patterns to give us flexible skeleton keys, and recovery phrases as our safety net. But how do we practice this so it's instantly available?
It comes down to mini scenes. Staring at a random list on a flashcard app won't help you. You need to practice a specific situation.
Like acting out a script. But we said scripts shatter.
It's not a rigid script. It's a sandbox. You choose a daily situation, ordering coffee. Establish your base pattern. Hi, could I have a coffee, please? Then, you intentionally change one detail to train flexibility.
Like asking for it to go.
Exactly. Could I get it to go, then change the payment? Could I pay by card? You train your brain to swap the pieces quickly.
Should I be trying to learn thousands of these?
Absolutely not. Build a personal phrase bank. 5 to 10 phrases per category that match your actual daily life.
But I want to push back on something. Reading these phrases silently in your head on the train. That isn't enough, is it?
No, it is definitely not.
If you don't practice out loud, it's like trying to learn how to swim by reading a book about water. You have to get your mouth moving.
The neuroscience backs you up completely. Reading silently uses visual processing. But speaking is a motor function. It requires the motor cortex to coordinate your lips and tongue. If you do not practice out loud, you aren't building the neural pathways.
It literally has to be muscle memory.
You must move the phrase from your conscious working memory into your automated procedural memory. When you're terrified in the bakery, your procedural memory will automatically deliver the phrase.
It takes the wheel when the cognitive brain panics. That is incredible. We've covered so much ground today. The PRO method, patterns,
Yeah.
recovery, openers.
And remember, the ultimate takeaway is not to wait until your English is perfect.
Right.
Start incredibly small. Order one drink using a pattern. Use one soft opener. Deploy one recovery phrase instead of just nodding. Each small success teaches the brain that English is not dangerous. Fluency is built in ordinary, everyday moments.
So think about the very next small interaction you're going to have today. Maybe it's buying groceries or asking a colleague a question. Instead of dreading it, how can you view that 10-second window as your own personal laboratory to test out just one new opener or phrase pattern? Get out there, run the experiment, and see what happens. We'll catch you next time.